Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 7, lucky number. And today, all the way from the United States, we have Dr. Genevive Julien, who is a clinical psychologist who integrates a holistic wellness and mindful approach into her methodology. So, first of all, Dr. Julien, welcome to the show. Thank you for being part of today's episode.
Aloha. Thank you, Josh, for having me on this platform. I think it's a great opportunity to connect to my work and spread the healing all over the world. So thank you.
So today, Dr. Julien will be sharing with us some of the techniques she has incorporated over the years, working with patients, working with prison inmates, working with young children, and also people from all walks of life, different cultures, different backgrounds, different spiritualities. And so, yes, Dr. Julien, would you like to share with us a bit more about your background and what started you doing what you are doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think growing up in Hawaii, those elements of spirituality has embedded in my way of living. And so I've taken those values to the mainland. And those elements being aloha and empathy and connectivity. Um, and so I think that's been my root and groundedness throughout this process is how do I do what I grew up with and what grounds me as a human being? So that has been the process for me is coming back to my roots, but then how do I become this sort of pioneer in my field and spreading that aloha? So to make a long story short, I think growing up in Hawaii and having the culture around me has inferred how I work with patients and people around me to this day.
Yes, thank you very much. And you mentioned, integrating mindfulness and holistic practices. What are some of the examples of this you have included in your professional practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think for me personally, having a background in having a nervous system, a very nervous system, if you will. And I think that integration of my experience has given me the empathy to work with patients who may suffer from anxiety or depression. And so, what it comes down to is this mind body connection. We know that we are built with what they call an autonomic nervous system, and that sort of spreads into two variations. We have that stress response, and then we have the relaxation response. I think that in our culture, there's this instant gratification of wanting to fix right here, right now. So the idea is then there's this discrepancy between expectation and reality. And that's sort of where the fear comes in. And so the techniques that I've used over the years have been, literally grounding ourselves in breath work. And we know, I think both of us being spiritual practitioners, there's so much diversity to that. But I've used yoga, somatic therapy, which is embodying the mind and body using breath. I've now currently using this beautiful calligraphy behind me more recently in my work in research with patients or subjects that suffered chronic pain, anxiety, and depression. So a lot has been around the mind, which can look different for everybody, but then connecting them, acknowledging that there is another element in healing, which is your body. So the groundwork has always been the breath. How do we connect to that? And that breath comes from the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Comes from that diaphragm, that relaxation response that helps us ground us in the moment. So it decreases the reactivity, and helps to regulate ourselves in the moment.
Yes, and the breath also is a mystery which has been pondered upon and experimented by the ancients, ancient practices from many different cultures and traditions from China, India, and many other ancient traditions as well. Um, Realizing, experiencing, and acknowledging the sacredness of breath, you know, even at the point of birth, um, the first breath to enter, into the soul or into our consciousness, being transported through breath. So many different mythologies and different stories from different traditions. So, and even in this modern day, we recognize, how by regulating our breath, by having deep breath, actually it connects with our emotions, it connects with our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our spiritual vitality. So very important. And for yourself, as you grew up and were exposed to the different modalities coming to this point, what makes you incorporate what you do in your work in terms of like Tao calligraphy and breath work, and why these practices?
Well, I find that over the years, various settings and diverse populations, I found that that has been the most, that has been the common denominator for all of us is deferring to that breath. Um, so as I've evolved in my work as a professional but personal development, I found that there is more to our bodies and mind. There is a essence of spirit or soul, and in the Western means that can be defined by quantum physics as energy. And so as that has evolved, I've found an affinity for Tao calligraphy behind me because it does encompass the mind, body, and spirit. Um, and this Tao calligraphy has been introduced by my spiritual teacher, Dr. and Master Sha. And what's beautiful about his background is he's a Western doctor, but he's also a grand master of everything traditional Chinese medicine. So there's a balance of yin and yang. And so this calligraphy provides variation. It has a universal language. You can move with it, you can meditate with it. And obviously, aesthetically, it's very attractive, And I think that, throughout traditions and cultures, calligraphy has been revered. But now this art form has a unique vibration and positive message to help heal and transform any condition that you are currently experiencing that you want to heal.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it incorporates symbolism to some level, right? Language as a form of symbolism, especially with calligraphy. Also, it can be seen as a channel of creative expression. Also, in terms of concentration, in terms of the hardness and the softness of strokes, which correspond to our temperament and our mentality at that point of time. So that's something very unique. We've never had anyone on this show, or I don't really know that many people who are also into Tao calligraphy. I would like to ask you a bit more on your dissertation when you worked with utilizing yoga to overcome burnout. Uh, for the psychology of the student. Would you like to share with us a bit more about yoga and burnt out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think naturally, as a student, you are um, attached to appeasing professors, completing assignments, being a broke student, limited finances, so naturally the depletion of emotional and physical resources, that's going to eventually lead to burnout. So how my story goes is I originally was specializing in neuropsychology. My original dissertation was on utilizing complementary alternative medicine in treating Alzheimer's patients. Why? I have no idea. It was something out of the blue that I decided I will do this. And like anything else, as an assignment, especially as large as a dissertation assignment, it's a marriage. And so it didn't speak to me, and I had to align with my current experiences. And I was burnt out. I was recently diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, naturally, being anxious throughout grad school. And I didn't know what at that time helped me work through this. And I stumbled upon some books. I went to a couple yoga classes, and I found that, wow, yoga is not only a physical aspect, but also a spiritual one. And I think to make it more simplistic, as you being a yoga practitioner, is deeper than a physical process. It aligns with different energy centers within your body that speaks to different organs and emotions, and one that is in flow. Things are balanced and aligned, and you decrease the illnesses, you improve your immunity. And so that's how I got into that work. And I found that doing a qualitative study and finding that most graduate students felt the same way, this compassion fatigue, this lack of motivation, pseudo depression in a lot of ways, that utilizing yoga was an opportunity for them to step outside of the physical body and get into the mind and also the essence of who they are. And yoga is a very specific technique with different poses that align with that essence of who you are. And so naturally, there's going to be an alignment with that relaxation response. And when you're grounded, there is opportunity.
Yes, I think it's an interesting study, especially over the last few decades in the West, trying to understand and comprehend a lot of these techniques and traditions from the East, whether it's Tai Chi or whether it's yoga or various forms of spiritual psychologies, especially within the academic setting. So, which is not very common, in traditional Western history, but it's right now in the modern world, in a very integrated, interconnected, multicultural globalizations. We realize this, there's dialogue for sharings, there's of new ideas, innovation, and we have some of the facilities and technology to also investigate some of the systems, which I think is very beneficial for practitioners and for non-practitioners, for everyone really. So we've spoken a bit about Tao calligraphy, and we've spoken a bit about your focus on yoga. You come from you have a lot of diversity in the sense, there's affiliation with Philippines, there's affiliation with Hawaii, and there's and the fact that you're also now based in California. So different ethnicities and backgrounds are involved here. Would you like to share a bit more about your personal background for the viewer?
Absolutely. So I am originally Filipino and Chinese. I was born in Manila, and I immigrated to Hawaii probably the first year in '85. So that could compute me as 35 years old at this time. But my family is originally from Hawaii, 3 generations. However, during World War II, my grandpa immigrated, came back. So anyway, to make a long story short, then I ended up in Maui, Hawaii. And again, I was sheltered. I just knew of paradise, but there was something within me that wanted to see what the world was like. and it landed me in Los Angeles, California. And let me tell you, it was a shock both to my nervous system and culturally, because here I am in a different setting of people, but also acculturation. So with that, I was able to see what suffering looked like because I lived on an island. Everybody's going to the beach, everyone's filled with aloha and love. But I landed in Los Angeles, was able to really recruit experiences such as working in Compton or Watts, East Los Angeles, downtown LA, Skid Row. I mean, these are some of the most notorious for violence gangs. And so that's what I did as a therapist. I drove around. I went to see clients. I took them to welfare. Um, I've worked with the Native American community as a therapist as well, and then I went to prison. I mean, the amount of trauma that these individuals have experienced has not only shaped me as an individual, but just really deepened my work as a professional, but personally and spiritually. That empathy has stuck with me. Um, so it's been the variety. I mean, I cannot tell you what I've experienced is beyond, you know, clearly it's helped me shape my worldview. And as a psychologist, you need to be able to meet the other person halfway, but really understanding their worldview. So I've seen suffering on so many levels, and I think again, it's helped me understand a different element of life, and giving me the spiritual stamina to serve other people.
And also, you had this study and interest and practice with Hawaiian spirituality. Would you like to share with the viewers
Uh-huh.
and for me as well? You know, I'm not too acquainted with the spiritualities in Hawaii, but would you like to share with us a bit more about the principles of
Mhm.
Aloha and Ho'oponopono?
I wrote an article on, which I will email you later. Aloha is it is a reflection, an element of love, and we know that love is not can be perfectly accurately described. It's something that is felt in the heart. And if you've ever been to Hawaii or a place that is unconditionally inviting, that is what I would define aloha as. There is no judgment, there is pure compassion, and there's just a level of organic chemistry um, in the islands and what aloha does and connects to other people. Um, so I think aloha is something that is easily um, practiced if you're open to it. And being in Hawaii, naturally, you're in paradise, so you're more than receptive to the process. And I think aloha has something instilled, obviously, within the culture, but it's a matter of acting on it and application. So not only is it theory, but I think that people in Hawaii definitely on a daily basis express that. And again, it's just like coming home to an invite mom or father. That's how I viewed Hawaii to be, is nurturing mother. Um, and a fun fact for those of you listening, Maui is apparently the heart chakra of Mother Earth. So I think alignment and that nurturing is just felt mind throughout the body and also spiritually. And again, aloha is something connected to the land. You know, there is naturally this interconnectedness with the aina and how we respect it and how we honor it. So I've seen aloha not only with our physical relationships, but our physical relationship with the land and And in terms of Ho'oponopono, it is a forgiveness practice. It's reconciliation. It is making peace with, in the traditional sense, with an extended family member. It's been obviously something within the tradition, but now it's becoming of a new age, which is not a bad thing necessarily, because I think the practice in essence is to help heal and serve other people. But in traditional sense, people would basically put their faces together, right? To make that physical connection, but also have this level of emotional intimacy, and really feel the forgiveness. So I wanted to share the four sacred lines. And, obviously you defer to what works for you and how many times it takes you to really connect with the words and really feel the release. So the first one is, I'm sorry. The second line is, please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I mean, even expressing those words, I immediately feel, please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Um, so I've used it personally, not in that intimate sense, but I would say it quietly to myself, or I would say it in a prayer. Again, just depending on who you are, you use it as such. So yes, Ho'oponopono is a powerful practice that can be used with anyone. You can do it with your dog, your pet, you know, coworker, and that's the beauty of it. It is a universal language we can use with everyone and anything.
Very interesting. Um, it's very essential that there's the affirmative intention. The motivation is selfless,
Mhm.
you know, while it might seem that it's,
Absolutely.
a personal form of forgiveness, but actually it's very interconnected, it's integrated. So it's very selfless in that sense. Um, so you did mention some of the practice is known working with family members initially. Would you say um,
Mhm.
it could help people in the modern day with intergenerational trauma, for example, or something which is more genetic?
Absolutely. Again, forgiveness and Ho'oponopono are intertwined. It is a matter of breaking down the barriers, right? And I think that would vary on the context. If we can put people together around in a circle to do that, and have it in a space where it's safe and nurturing, it can be absolutely facilitated. So this again can be used with trauma. This can be used with um, different cultures, but also, like you mentioned, in the different generations, right? Because again, it's a universal language.
Yeah, definitely. Forgiveness, kindness, compassion, these are human qualities. These are universal values, which can be
Mhm.
cultivated and actually shared, beyond boundaries, unconditionally. Um, it's just within the human condition as well. When we grasp towards a sense of self, towards I and you, when there's this kind of dualistic division, this kind of illusory separation,
Mhm.
it becomes a bit difficult, and that is one of the main causes of our dissatisfaction, in human condition.
Mhm.
If we identify ourselves as independent entities, which is permanent, which is singular, which is unitary, and fail to recognize not only empathetically, but also with our knowledge and wisdom, the interconnectedness,
Yeah.
with all sentient beings, not only human beings, but also animals, and nature, our environment, our ecology, the whole ecosphere, and realizing how interconnected this whole framework of existence. It's just like looking into our cellular structure. It's just like looking into looking even subatomically, the neutrons, the protons, the nucleus. It is all within a very conducive, interdependent relationship. And so that's how our integral being of our body, our emotions, our mind, and our spirit, in that sense, all interconnected and not divided. So I think what you have been sharing with us, to push the envelope, especially within the academic sense of your field, and also using that scholarly potential you have within the spiritual communities, and the experience you are bringing in to share with these people, that it's integrative and it's interdependent, and we cannot ignore one thing to focus on this other thing. We have to look at these different causes and conditions as it comes in these ways. So it's not it's not one shoe size fits all. We have to cater to the different needs of the problem. So I think it's a very, very interesting sharing you have produced to share with all of us so far. And we're just curious to know what are some of the individual practices you do this on each day to ground yourself, to attain level of balance and happiness. So we'd like to share with us some routines that people can pick up, or even some from your own practice.
Absolutely. I wanted to kind of piggyback on what you were saying earlier, just to kind of drive the point home. There's definitely a level of shifting in consciousness, both academic and me working within a meta culture, and also culturally, there needs to be a lot of the receptivity, and it has to come from a similar language that we can propose to them that's going to make sense. And I think as a psychologist, I can bridge the language and the communication to spirituality, oneness, mind, body, spirit connection. And I think that's a gift that I have been able to refine over the years, and in particular the diverse populations I've worked with. And here I am, I'm this naive island girl walking into some really heavy traumatic settings and learning how that particular culture goes through their process of challenge and healing, and integrating the information from what I know into what makes sense to them, right? So I think it's just going to be some layers that we work through, but also bridging communication and this oneness language that's going to make sense to them. So thank you for bringing that point. I think it's a very salient one that I think sometimes we overlook, because we have the yin and yang. We have, like, I practice within a hospital setting where I'm a pain health psychologist. I work on the mind, and I have the doctor who comes in to study the matter and the anatomy of the body, but really they're not two separate things. We are one. I think having to bring that forefront has been challenging, but there's a shift. It's just a matter of science to tell them stuff works, right? Anyway, so the question was, I don't remember the question. Like, oh, my different practices, right? So as a spiritual practitioner, I do grounding practices in the morning as I'm going into work. I make sure that I'm focusing on Dantian. And if you are not familiar with the Lord Dantian, it is in traditional Tai Chi sense that there's a energy center in your lower abdomen that helps to facilitate immunity, vitality, and stamina. So I do a particular chant that invocates that energy center to activate. Um, and then out the day, I continue. I don't know, Josh, if you want me to go into six, but um, I have a mala bead that I have, and it helps ground me. So when I'm feeling activated in that stress response, I know I'm touching my mala beads. I have a particular affirmation I say to myself to help clear and cleanse whatever is blocking me to stay in the present moment. And then as I'm going home, I do a forgiveness practice. So for all the individuals that I have harmed, hurt through my speech, actions, or behaviors, I ask as a part of that Ho'oponopono revelation, right? That I'm clearing and cleansing my consciousness to help me start the next day. And also, again, you know, this has been my main focal point. The calligraphy, I do a lot of movement because you have to do, not you have to do, but there's a yin and yang that I meditate in front of it, but I also do movement. So the meditation I do is from my heart and up. That is my heart intelligence. The heart down is my grounding practice. So you see that there's that blend of heart and body combined to really help me sustain myself throughout the day. So and you know, I do the breathing and yoga throughout the day just to help again connect with the presence of my nervous system and check in with it and grace it with that breath. So those are my practices.
Thank you for sharing some of your
Mm-hmm.
personal private practices. And, you know, for those who are tuning in or who have just tuned in, we have Dr. Genevive Julien, who is a psychologist from America with a very diverse background. And so far, we have been discussing about the mind-body connection, mindfulness, and she has shared, I would say, two very major points with Tau calligraphy at the beginning. And around the middle point, we were also sharing about Hawaiian spirituality with Aloha and Ho'oponopono. And yes, so besides the fact of her psychological background and a spiritual practitioner aspect, you know, Jen, I mean, you're also a wife and a mother as well. And, you know, there's this levels of different experiences you have gone through as well, very integrative. Would you like to share, you know, I mean, the spiritual practice of being a mother, of being a wife, you know, how has that empowered you, and what are you learning? What have you learned, which you can share with people who are in motherhood, people who have families, and all that?
Yeah, I believe there's no such thing as balance. I mean, there is to some degree, but I think find what element will help you stay in the present of joy and peace. Um, with being a mother, I think it's pretty straightforward. My son has been one of my greatest teachers, and I think in that is he helps me understand the true sense of love because he will test me on all levels, um, my patience and my patience, because I come home after coaching, reflecting, making space, and attending to people's needs that I have to come home and do the same. So I remind myself in that moment when I am activated, what are my choices? It's not a perfect process, but I think it's one of those parts of the spiritual journey that you refine and you build a muscle around. Um, so I think for him, hope that I can role model what it is to just be an empathetic, compassionate human being. I mean, I know that may sound cheesy or corny, but I truly think that what you represent and what you do will be role model in front of your child, and they can pursue what they feel is aligned with those higher values. And it's really interesting because I have a lot of mantra music in the back, and I have a particular teacher and mantra that I say, and he started to chant with me as well. So this refining is already coming from a place of receptivity as a child, but also I'm helping him and aiding him in molding his own spiritual journey as well. And as a wife, my goodness, it's a whole different story. But my husband being my spiritual journey, he finds that my devotion to what I do is admirable. So he stays out of the way, which is a good thing. He stays out of the way. He knows this is something that is a priority, but it's compassion, it's purity, and it's communication, and that's always something of a day-to-day that we both agree upon, but passionately work through. So I've been molded from all aspects, Josh, to really hone in on life for sure.
It's, I found it, it was, just the work of words, like you mentioned earlier, and it came to my mind when you were speaking a bit about being a mother. So, I mean, professionally, you go to work, you see patients, patients. And then when you come home, you learn from your son, patience, patience. So patience and patience, a very interesting combinations of words, and it's invaluable practice, patience. So, there's in Buddhism, there was a great teacher called Shantideva, and he wrote a text several hundred years ago, and he mentioned about one of the highest virtues or the highest qualities is to cultivate and develop patience, to practice patience, to overcome anger, patience. So patience in a sense is like a seed for compassion. If you're talking about, overcoming a defilement or mental affliction like anger, which can be very disruptive in some cases, right? It depends how we channel it, but patience as a seed of compassion. And then on the other hand, in terms of due diligence, in terms of tenacity, to have the patience, the consistent patience to endure, the challenges we face in life. So this is like a multi-dimensional aspect of patience, right? It's like an endurance, it's like a resilience, it's like a perseverance, it's like a consistency, which of bringing our mind, of bringing our breath back towards this patience. So I think it was something really important about that, being in the moment you mentioned, cultivating this joy, and then emanating patience, very invaluable.
Yeah, thank you. I think that when you point, it's coming to light the irony, of seeing patients all day and being patient with them, and then coming home and continuing to refine and cultivate that with my own DNA. And I really love that you kind of bring it back to the Buddhist teachings. I'm gonna have to start interviewing you, Josh, because there's a lot that you can share from this, right? So it definitely brings that spiritual light to practice, and I think that's always a great reminder, because that's where my reference is, my wisdom bank, as I say.
Yes, and Dr. Julien has also shared with us some of her practices earlier. Very important to have to actually establish our intention. One of the things I do, the first thing which comes to my mind when I wake up, when my eyes open, when I'm conscious of being awake, every morning
Mhm.
before going to work, or even on the weekend if before having my activities, is to remind myself of the intention, the motivation. And then this intention is not just of goals which I need to do or boxes you need to tick for the day, but it's more like your life motivation. And then, of course, the other goals like things which you need to do for today. Yes, today now I need to get ready to go to work, and I need to take the planning. But built upon this intention,
Mm.
in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's an emphasis on bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, it's a Sanskrit word
Mhm.
which literally translates to the mind of enlightenment or the mind of awakening. But in this context, it's actually bodhicitta is referred to in a motivational sense towards altruistic enlightenment, towards universal compassion. So I always wake up thinking of this, and
Mm.
then the basis of whatever tasks and whatever things which need to be done. Hopefully, I can be mindful towards my general universal intention. So I think this is what I would like to share, because you have shared
Mm.
how it's important to align, to have the intentions, affirmations, motivations. So for those people who are tuning in, who are at this part of the broadcast, very important, before our intentions drive our actions. Our intentions drive our actions, whether it's our speech, whether it's our thought, whether it's our action, our
Mhm.
general actions, physical actions and whatnot. So the intention,
Mhm.
if it's as extensive and expansive, invaluable, we'll
Mhm.
feel the benefits, other people will feel the benefits, the wider the scope is, and the more expansive it comes from the heart mind, the more comprehensive the effect. So very
Mm.
important about the intentions, as we're highlighting right now: patience, persistence. So during these times, moving on to like this moment where we are having with the pandemic, and I've just seen the election results as well in America, and also just in general this year for a lot of people all over the world, especially with the pandemic. um, some people lost their jobs, and
Mm.
also with health, in terms of people getting the virus and whatnot, economic, health. What are some of the things you have learned personally this year and would like to share with the viewers here, and what do you think we can build upon, from such a challenging year?
Testing and adaptability. Working in both the hospital and the psych department, I've been inundated with patients saying, "This is the worst year ever. I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do." And I think that just comes with the novelty of experiencing such challenges on all levels. So I think the way that I've tried to approach it is just having a validation of the experience itself, that this is a type of suffering, allowing them to acknowledge that this is present, but giving them an opportunity to expire. And what I mean by that is when there is an individual that continues to ruminate in that space, or decides to feel paralyzed by it, well, there's no agency, there's no sort of efficacy to move out of that space. So it's just reminding them that this is an opportunity for growth and change. But again, it just kind of varies on their receptivity and where they're at and context. We each human beings have such a biopsychosocial process that you kind of have to meet them where they're at. So in terms of kind of a general scope, I found that just encouraging, but also giving them education and skills to move forward. So I think you give them that human connectivity, but on the other end is skills acquisition. What type of resources can we provide to you? What does that look like? homework assignments, coping skills. What is your foundation for spirituality, your gratitude, and just allowing them to understand that, unfortunately, this has been feeling like a blanket, but this too shall pass with anything else in life. And I always bring it back to science, neuroplasticity. That tells us that we are able to adapt accordingly. And it's just when we're activated in that space, it feels like it's a catastrophe altogether. So a lot of it then is refining that space where they're able to kind of look in a mirror, right, metaphorically, and just be able to wipe down the illusion that they're not able to do it. So I think approaching it in a way that comes from a very resilient place, and understanding that we've had to adapt and we will change. And this really is going to help you be grateful for your ability to move through this. And I always do this with patients. I compare them from 8 months ago till now. Let's talk about milestones. Let's talk about progress. See where you were back in March and here you are now. Come on, you've got this. You've always got this. Sometimes that's just the fear that comes up, and which is a natural experience. We're human beings. So that's sort of my approach. It is varied based on case to case, but I think overall, I give them a level of clarity and helping them to find solution and problem solve, but also caring for themselves. So that looks like going outside. That looks like the practical parts, caring for ourselves to, eat better, connecting with people who are positive. So again, there's multi-layers to this, but I think overall it's just approaching and it will make sense to them. And I think as far as what I've learned in 2020, I think me personally has been just refining and inferring on data based on what's happening. And what I mean by that is just trying to stay present with each of it day to day. And I think that naturally, when things are unknown, we resort to fear. And that is, again, a human condition, but helping to understand that there is a level of fluidity, and that there's strength always behind those doors. So I think for me, it's just been stressful because we've been impacted on all layers. And being a provider, I think I've had to ground myself in gratitude, because I had this opportunity now to serve other people in the way that I can, and reminding them of their human spirit to resume in resiliency. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And yeah, just to wrap up, this episode, and what you have mentioned also about some of the lessons we can learn so far in this challenging year. And sometimes it's also getting back down to the basics, of self-care, as you mentioned. So even looking at our diet, to eat well, to drink enough water, to have enough sleep, and to also evaluate our emotions. Emotional hygiene is really important. The cultivation of ethics, the cultivation of values. And sometimes, when we're harboring around certain thoughts, just to be mindful without judgment, to have this kind of discerning intelligence, not to over exaggerate our ego, and at the same time not to beat ourselves up, which we tend to do. It's either we are expanding out to think we are bigger than the world, or we really squeeze down really low into hopelessness. And at that point, if we reach that stage, it's always to channel the gratitude towards things we have, whether it's a house, whether it's something to eat for today, friends, family, loved ones. Sometimes we base things so externally that we forget that we have, qualities within ourselves which are we seldom unrecognize, we seldom do not recognize, that we have, that human potential is compassionate, is loving kindness,
Yes.
is wisdom, you know. So as long as we are able to channel this potentiality, to recognize, first of all, acknowledge, and to slowly cultivate this channeling, is already a essential form of self-care and selfless care at the same time. So it's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for those watching, always to always have this sense of gratitude, as Dr. Julien has mentioned earlier, the sense of gratitude, and also to cultivate empathy towards others, and also kindness towards self and others. Sometimes we give out so much and then we feel burnt out. So it's about the wisdom of knowing what to do, when, and how. And to have a proper diet, not only in terms of the physical food we are putting into our mouth, but the nutrition of thoughts, the nutrition of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Just like how our human body is also in a way like a filtration system. Our mind, we have also this kind of there's also techniques we can use to filter out. And if we are in difficult situations, if we are in communities or groups which we deem as toxic situations, we have the will to remove ourselves from that situation. If we find it difficult to deal with it co-currently, we can remove ourselves from the situation. And people like Dr. Julien, they're out there. you know they provide assistance, they provide help. So for anyone who's going
Right.
through all kinds of difficulties, don't hesitate and contact um, you know contact people like Dr. Genevive Julien, who provides work like this, and to seek
Yeah.
some form of counseling, to have dialogue,
Absolutely.
to have some kind of a sharing, with others, so that you can express what you really feel in a conducive way, in a harmonious way, in a sense of a
Yeah.
dialogue session. So Dr. Genevieve Julien, thank you once again for sharing. I think we've covered so much within this
Oh,
short
thank you.
space of time, from Hawaiian spirituality to your practice with Taoism, and just trying
Sure.
to make it very,
Yeah.
what we have done today is try to make it very accessible for the modern day person, whether they are familiar with the systems of modalities or whether they are not, that there are practices of bringing your attention back to the breath, of trying to sleep early, of analyzing our thoughts, of doing more yoga and meditation, depending where you're
Mm,
at, to
mm,
continue to cultivate a holistic way of well-being. So, Dr. Julien,
absolutely.
anything you would like to say before we wrap episode number 7?
I love that you put it out there visual. No, I'm in my deepest gratitude for you to be able to provide a platform for me to share my wisdom, my experiences, but also reminding everyone that we're human being and we're all going through this together. And absolutely, the empathy and compassion is there, present, the intention, but it does have to come from first yourself. And then that way you can kind of navigate more gracefully through your outer world. But also, it is a process that comes in time. I think that when I do connect with people, times they're in just this space of such suffering that you're just a guide. You are there to just provide the wisdom. So if they are receptive, wonderful. If they're not, give them compassion, love otherwise, because what they really need is that connection, and regardless of where they're at. And that kind of infers to what my experiences. I've worked with inmates that, are calling me interesting names and throwing feces at me. So I've had to really hone in on that person is just having a challenging, more than challenging day. They're in a psychotic episode. That's nothing that I need to take personal. So I think that that muscle that we have is there. It just is refined by experiences and practices. And so I think what I want to download to you, to everyone, is just having a ritual of hygiene, like what Josh has mentioned, and that discerning emotional intelligence for ourselves and for one another, and that we're navigating through this in the best way that we can, and just acknowledging that will help bring in that gratitude. And when we're in that place of gratitude, we can kind of navigate more clearly what we need to do next. So thank you, Josh, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Julien, for your insights, your kindness, your wisdoms, your compassion today, for contributing and co-creating this episode with myself and all of us who are tuning in. So yeah, so for those people who have been following the episodes or who have just seen this one as your first, you can subscribe to my YouTube page, and there'll be more episodes coming up in due time with diverse topics, but centered around mindfulness and how we can integrate them in our daily lives. So Dr. Genevive Julien, thank you once again, and wishing everyone who's watching a fantastic week ahead, and hopefully this is very useful for all of us. So take care and bye.
All right, bye. Aloha.